As you know, there are a ton of issues in the video game space right now. They range from all sorts of things, ranging from obviously the injection of DEI to the overinflated budgets. But there's a video that I found that I think really hits the head on the nail, or the nail on the head. Hey everybody, I'm Craig. Welcome to the Side Scrollers Podcast channel. Glad you guys are here. If you're new, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Join the 104,000 normal men. And hey, let's check this thing out. Now, this is from a creator I've been a big fan of called Legendary Drops. He's been growing incredibly fast over on YouTube. I encourage you guys to check out his channel and, of course, subscribe to him. Now, I'm going to put the link to the entire video down below. We're going to take out two little segments of this video, each a couple minutes long, to really highlight. Now, obviously, we know a lot about the overall cost of video games. We'll get to that in just a second. But there's a general thought of like what's wrong with video games as a whole. And the general idea of toxic positivity has been something that has been going on and on and on over the course of the last several years, where these people inside the industry, they don't want to disagree because they don't want to be shamed for having wrong think. They don't want to tell you, hey, maybe that's not a good idea, because then you'd be ostracized, right? There's no pushback on any of these ideas. But it's not just in the studios themselves, it's also within the media. So I wanted to play a few minutes of this and go in and really kind of analyze what Legendary Drops is saying in the situation. This comes from an article actually from IGN with a Space Marine 2 developer, and then Drops has some interesting insight on it. So let's go check this out and let's watch along. We're gonna watch this at about 1.25 speed. Once again, I encourage you to watch the video in its regular speed over on the Legendary Drops channel. So here we go. Let's check this out.
Recently, in an article written by Wesley Yin Poole of IGN titled Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2 Dev says big budget games are failing in part because teams are overscoping their projects. Great games do well. Wesley spoke with Saber Interactive Chief Creative Officer Tim Willits about the issues that the game industry is facing today and the success of Space Marine 2. Wesley writes, Concord, Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, Star Wars Outlaws, Final Fantasy 16. The list of big budget video game failures is growing longer each month, with AAA publishers struggling to make a dent in the dominance of older, more established players in this most brutal of markets.
That's something that you hear consistently over and over again. Is the people are oh well, people are playing older games. They're playing older games. Why are they? They're still playing Fortnite. They're still playing Call of Duty from several years ago. They're still playing Mario, whatever. Why? Why are they playing the older games? Well, it may have to do with the cost. It may just have to do with the idea of rejecting the ideology that's within these games. Possibly, just throwing it out there. Let's continue.
Throughout it all, massive hits have come out of nowhere. One of those is Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2, developed by World War Z and SnowRunner studio Saber Interactive and published by Focus Entertainment. Of course, Space Marine 2 benefited from the strength of the Warhammer 40K brand, which has been carefully managed by Games Workshop and is about as big as it's ever been. But still, Space Marine 2's breakout success came as a surprise even to its developer, as Saber Chief Creative Officer Tim Willits told IGN in a recent interview.
Now, this game, if you went back and played like Gears of War, that's kind of a close. It's not exactly like, but Space Marine 2 has a Gears of War like combat, in that there was the badass chainsaw associated with it. This year, obviously, you have your fucking big old mallet here just beating the hell out of people. Have you played Space Marine 2? Let me know your thoughts about it in the comment. Just this overall horde ass kickery here.
As the video game industry comes to terms with high-profile failures of the likes of Concord and Suicide Squad, what enabled Space Marine 2 to succeed? Both Concord and Suicide Squad took years to develop at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars, and launched into genres some say gamers had long since moved on from. It is Saber's biggest ever video game undertaking and took 4 years to develop, a significant cycle as far as AAA production goes, although, as we've seen with Concord and Suicide Squad, hardly an outlier. Indeed, we've seen huge hits from video games that have had similar long developments. Arrowhead's Helldivers 2, the fastest-selling PlayStation Studios game of all time, took just shy of 8 years to develop and at significant expense. It is an oversimplification to say that Concord and Suicide Squad's long developments were the root cause of their failure, although they clearly played a big part. I'm going to stop you right there.
And this is where Drops goes off on this. Legendary Drops goes off. And if I was reading this article, I would have stopped right then, exactly for this exact same reason. He nails it here.
One of the biggest issues that the games industry is facing today is the fact that they're listening to journalists and analysts rather than the players. And these...
Where have we heard that before? This idea of like, you're not listening to the customer, the people who are actually paying the game. You're paying for the game. You're listening to the people who are writing about the games. You're listening to your buddies, this toxic positivity that we just talked about just a second ago. It's amazing how that all intertwines. It's amazing.
These people are telling them what they want to hear, and that's why they keep making the same mistake over and over again. You're bringing up Final Fantasy 16 in the same conversation as Star Wars Outlaws, Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, and Concord. Are you out of your mind? That game sold 3 million copies in its first year, and while it didn't meet Square Enix's financial target, you're not talking about the fact that those targets were put in place because they were trying to make up for the losses that they incurred on Foam Stars and Forspoken.
How often have you seen that? The idea of one game failed, so we have to have this game do extra good to make up for that. Speaking of Forspoken, I have its Steam charts pulled up right now. Over under on how many people are playing Forspoken right now by Square Enix? Anybody? Anybody? No? Okay. Well, we're currently sitting at 46. 46 people are playing this right now. And don't forget about Foam Stars. Remember Foam Stars? This was obviously designed to be the Splatoon competitor for Sony. Yeah, that got rejected to half court, straight out of Dikembe Mutombo style. Rest in peace, Dikembe. You guys know I'm a big Dikembe fan. But the Foam Stars dropped 54% on PlayStation 5 2 weeks in. And this was back over, this was earlier this year. Foam Stars came out on PlayStation, and it came out. I was like, okay, cool. And it was free to play on top of that. Like, man. So, hey, we really need this game to work. So we're really going to over promise, or at least put our sales figures, our expectations up higher. And of course, that's gonna cause for underwhelming sales when it's unreasonable for the first sales to begin with, the projections. Let's go ahead and continue on with what Legendary Drops is saying here.
I feel like they just say things to say things. Saying that Space Marine 2 was successful because of Warhammer, the vast majority of people that bought that game had no background with Warhammer before. They said the same thing about Baldur's Gate 3 because we all know how much everybody loves Wizards of the Coast. Come on. And what is with this idea that the more money that's spent on a game and the longer its development is going to have any impact on how the market receives a game? With Concord, if they developed that game for 2 years or 20 or spent $10 or $10 billion, it wouldn't have mattered. Like Outlaws, like Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, it was a bad game. Nobody wanted to play it, and nobody was ever interested in it.
That's the big thing. Nobody was ever interested in Concord to begin with. I've said this over and over again. People talk about the gameplay, but before you even get to the gameplay, you have to see something that interests you. You have to see characters that you go, oh, that looks awesome. You have to see a color palette that goes, oh, that's pleasing to my eye. You have to see something in the trailers that makes you draw you in. You got to get people in your store before you can sell them something. And Concord didn't do that.
Saying that it has something to do with players moving away from a genre. Well, if that was the case, then why did Concord fail and Deadlock succeed?
Ding, ding, ding.
I'd like to know. I just don't understand why game developers and games journalists don't want to talk about the elephant in the room. They see the culprit. It's like a Scooby-Doo episode. They just feign ignorance over it. You're making games that players don't want. You're targeting audiences with a minuscule demographic of people that are actually active out there buying games in the first place.
And who is that? The modern audience. That's right. It's the modern audience that doesn't exist. You're targeting these people that literally aren't there at all. It's amazing.
You're targeting that audience. You're targeting audiences that don't even play video games to begin with. And while I applaud you for wanting to be inclusive, you're selling skis in the desert. What do you expect to happen?
selling skis in the desert. Man, he nailed that in the best possible way. I love it. What a great analogy right there. So, okay, we've laid it down. What's wrong with games? We're selling game. We're making games that have incredible budgets associated with it. We have a cost that is too high, which we're going to get into even further. And we're making games for people that don't exist, for a fraction of the overall gaming audience, right? You cannot make the next Star Wars as Sony wanted Concord to be if you're selling it for a fraction of people. You got to cast that net as wide as you possibly can. All right, let's continue on. There's a second part here. Once again, I have the link to this down below so you guys can watch the entire video for yourself. But this second part talks specifically about the cost of games associated with it. So let's go get into this and see the second half of this.
To meet audience expectations. Too many cooks in the kitchen, too many ideas, too many ideologies, too many managers to get anything approved, and too many people to get anything done within a reasonable amount of time.
Now, he's specifically talking about how in 2020, there was a bunch of investment in the gaming space. So they threw a bunch of money at it, and investors are saying, hey, where's my money going? Where's my money going? And they would hire a bunch of nobodies, a bunch of, in his words, warm bodies, a bunch of people who would just hang out and do nothing, that didn't have the skill set, didn't have the ability, people that may have a certain agenda to put into it. And that's what happened. Let's continue.
Black Myth Wukong cost $43 million to make and was made by 140 employees. Baldur's Gate 3 had 450 employees and a budget of $100 million. Space Marine 2 likely had 200 developers or less and cost around the same. These games didn't succeed because they had massive budgets and thousands of employees. They succeeded because they spent less to make more.
Oh, what, man? Oh, it's such an easy idea. If you want to make money in business, you don't spend a lot, and then you generate more than you spend. It sounds so silly, and it is so simple. But the cost of these games, how often have we heard this? The idea of the $500 million game in Concord space situation, $400 million before market. Like, what are we talking about here? When did games decide? When did we 9,000 people to make a video game? When did that become a thing? Well, how about nine people to make a video game? 10. How about one with solo devs? Crazy.
They didn't hire for numbers. They hired for talent. They didn't employ employees. They employed artists. They had a clear vision. Hire for numbers. They hired for talent.
I want to just listen to what he says here. They hired for numbers, but not for talent. Such a basic premise. Why are you hiring just to hire? You hire to bring people on who have the skill set to help your company grow. What are we doing?
Employees, they succeeded because they spent less to make more. They didn't hire for numbers. They hired for talent. They didn't employ employees. They employed artists. They had a clear vision for what the players wanted to make, and they delivered it. Just make it make sense to me. You made Concord, which cost you $400 million, and you made it to appeal to an audience. Its identity as a product, because you made your characters a certain way, and you had a very specific image that you were going for, and you had the whole movie thing that was attached to it.
Yep.
That game was made for a minority of beliefs within the consumer base. This isn't about social politics or anything like that. I'm just talking raw numbers. These are not opinions or ideologies that are held by the vast majority of consumers. You say that you want to target wider audiences, casual audiences, people that don't even play video games, but the things that you're making don't even appeal to those people in the first place. So what are you doing?
Correct. You are alienating that audience. We want to make the next Star Wars. By the way, only this section of people will really enjoy it. Does that make sense to anybody? Anybody at all? No. And that's why I wanted to showcase this video today. He nails it. Nails it.
And why are you going to act surprised when your game releases and you sell it to the realistic amount of people that you should see for sales for a game like that? They sold 25,000 copies. That's pretty realistic for that game, in my opinion.
A percentage of a percentage of a percentage of people. That was Concord's audience.
This comes down to something that I brought up in a previous video, and I do truly believe this. I think that what ended up happening in the video game industry, and the reason why it's suffering so much right now, is that in the race to scale up, because the game industry exploded. It's now the biggest entertainment industry in the entire world. It makes more money than movies, television, and music put together. In that scale up, with all that investor money that came in, all these companies had to show that they were growing. And the best way for them to show that they're growing, because it takes a while to make a video game, is to expand and hire more employees and start more projects, because that's what investors want to see. They want to see how you're scaling up. How are you growing and getting bigger? What are you using my money for? They want to see that reflected. And doing that, they weren't out there hiring talent. They were just hiring warm bodies. That's all that they wanted. And as a result, they hired on a ton of these talentless NPCs that 90% of their life is based on what's happening on the internet. And they think what's reflecting in the screen of this device here or on your computer monitors is what you see in real life. And it's just not true. The opinions that you see shared on the internet, the beliefs that you see shared on the internet, are not how people react in real life. And it's also not how people make decisions on what they're going to buy and what they're not going to buy.
Oh my gosh. Right. Just fire right there from Legendary Drops. And listen, every normal man knows this. Everybody understands this idea. The idea that what you see, Twitter is not real life. We say this all the time. Facebook, not real life. You only see people's best and worst of themselves. You never see the average day-to-day life. You never see their regular spending habits. Yes, I'm sure these platforms have more than enough data about you, more than enough data to know your spending habits, your hobbies, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, man, you can't just look at Twitter and see what's trending that day and make a game about it. Or you can't see what is trending for 12 hours on a random day on in 2020 and then make a game that expect for that character to resonate with people in 2024, or in this case 2025. I'm looking at Ubisoft, right? You can't make changes based off of things that are happening in society for an individual character. It's not real life. We all understand that. Twitter, it's fake. It's fun. It's toxic. It's fake. But we have so many people in the video game industry that look and live on Twitter every day, on social media every day, and are obsessed with all that stuff happening. And it ultimately leaks into these products. Man, I love it. Look, I'm going to put a link to that full video down below. It's in the description. You guys go check that out. Once again, go subscribe to the Legendary Drops channel. And of course, subscribe to our channel over here. It's a Side Scrollers podcast. We're live Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And I'd love for you to join us one of these days. It'd be great to see you. Hit the subscribe button. Go watch another video right here. Appreciate you guys. Have a great day.